Hello everyone, I'm Casper. Welcome to Testeroni, where we help the aspiring QA engineers become test automation engineers one slice at a time. And today we are going to talk about 5 things you wish they told you about test automation. So number 1 is that you don't need that much programming knowledge. So I think this is kind of a misconception that you need a lot of programming knowledge. This is something that people fear. They fear that they won't be able to do that. They fear they won't be able to actually grasp all the concepts that are necessary. And to be truthful, the amount of programming knowledge you need to carry with you is actually way less than you probably think. And so I find it to be actually within the grasp of basically all the people, or most of the people that want to make the jump from manual tests to automated testing. It's not really that overwhelming, and I really recommend a video we have on that on the channel, which is called Don't Be a Good Programmer. It goes into much more detail regarding what you actually need to get your feet wet in the field, and what is just kind of an added fluff. I really recommend watching that to actually understand more about that. But one thing you should remember from this video is that you don't need that much programming knowledge. However, as with all good news, there's also a bad news that comes along with them. And the bad news is that programming is just the tip of the iceberg, because number 2, test automation is way more interdisciplinary than most people think. And so most people deem test automation to be just kind of manual testing with programming sprinkled on top. So I think that is actually very misleading, and it's not doing justice to the role of a test automation engineer. So over the course of your career, you are going to stumble upon tons of things that you'll need to understand to a lesser or greater extent. You'll need to be able to navigate the complex, sometimes, tech stacks that are present within the organization or within your project, the in-house systems, the tooling that other departments are using, both ones that are much deeper under the hood, like stuff that the backend guys are using, and ones which are closer to the surface, like the CMS system, for example. If you are doing something in the e-commerce space, very often you need to be able to navigate through them and sometimes even use them in order to be a proficient tester. This also happens in manual testing. You have probably stumbled upon things like that so far also, but in automated testing, I feel that it happens to an even greater extent, because there's no getting around knowing the continuous integration and continuous development tools. For example, you will need to know some Jenkins stuff. Sometimes you'll need to know more DevOps stuff, like, for example, understanding Docker or something like Kubernetes. Always you'll need to understand the version control systems in order to be able to operate within an organization and to be able to actually cooperate on stuff. So like understanding a version control of your project's choice is an absolute must. And these are just the first things that come to mind. However, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by all of this, because that's not my point at all. You will learn these tools as you go, and you absolutely shouldn't just stop here and learn about all the stuff that I mentioned, because the truth is you'll never be absolutely 100% prepared, because you will learn these things as you go and as the project demands and as the organization demands. Depending on the project, the organization, the team, the needs will also fluctuate. So you can't really be prepared for that. You need to be prepared for being prepared, but you don't need to have all those knowledge or all these pieces of knowledge like from the get-go. You should just remember that these things may happen. Some of these things you'll need to know to a lesser extent, some of them to a greater extent, and depending on your professional journey and the organizations and projects that you come across, you may know more about some things and less about some other things. You will remember stuff, forget stuff. That's very usual, and so you should not get discouraged or scared by all of this. It's what makes test automation such a thrilling field to actually partake in, because you are learning a lot of stuff from different domains on top of your testing knowledge. This also means that you are never stuck within your bubble for too long. And this brings us to point number 3, which is you will sometimes test manually more than you'll automate. And so people often think that once they go into automation, that's basically the end of any manual testing they'll ever do. They are just basically test developers at this point. So I hate to break it to you, but that's probably not going to be the case. In the real world, the roles of a test automation engineer and the QA engineer are basically always kind of entangled together, and so the lines are very blurry. To actually pinpoint a some kind of a border, it's a little fuzzy. And so I want you to be prepared that in the real life, going to test automation most often won't mean that you will never touch manual tests again. We'll have a specific video on that because it's a very important concept, and I think it warrants a deeper dive into it. So if the video is already up, that it will be somewhere around here and in the description. So check the channel. But in general, in the real life, like I said, these roles are kind of entwined. And so the specifics will depend on the project, of course, because for some projects, it'll be more in unison. For the others, the roles will be separated more. It depends. And generally, I can't really give you a clear-cut answer. I just want you to be prepared that in most situations, as a test automation engineer, you will need to chip in to manual testing to a more or less extent. And depending, like I said, on the project and on the organization, the extent may be so big that you will feel like a QA engineer with some additional steps. Because very often you will still need to partake in the manual verification of new stuff, or in the checking of new functionalities. It's also worth noting that not everything is a great fit for automation, and so I will recommend also a video on the channel which is called that should you automate everything. But if we want to understand the extent of the responsibilities of a test automation engineer, we need to understand that in reality, very, very rarely will the roles be so separate that you will forget about manual testing. You will take some responsibility of manual testing, and nowadays it's very common for the test automation engineers to be also like the sole QA engineers in the team. So in this case, of course, any testing is also your responsibility. But all in all, even if you happen to get into a project where the separation is like 100%, like good luck with that. So we are talking about unicorns right now, but I've come across some projects which were pretty close to that. So let's give it the benefit of the doubt that these things happen. Even if you get into a project like that and your sole responsibility is creating test automation, even then you still need to do exploratory testing. You need to click through the application to see all the new features in order to understand them. You need to do a lot of exploratory and manual testing while you are creating your scripts. You need to do manual testing basically before, during, and after creating your test cases, because that's what makes you a good test automation engineer: understanding the application, understanding the bottlenecks, being able to actually address them before they arise so that you don't cause like any flakiness within tests. We also have a video on test flakiness, which is called just what is test flakiness, and I will recommend watching that also in order to understand what can happen if you want to stick to being test automation engineer too much. Like when you just decide that you ain't ever going to touch manual testing. You should touch manual testing because you should understand the application, and that is the basis of what will make your automated tests better. So there is no real get around that, and you will do manual tests even when you are a test automation engineer. And at some organizations, you are going to be doing manual testing like more than you're automating. So be prepared for that. Number 4 is that the last time you'll ever see problems like in the tutorials are going to be in the tutorials. So nowadays there's a lot of knowledge floating around, and there's a lot of boot camps, and there's a lot of extensive tutorials online that will help you prepare for the job. So the thing about them is that while they are of course important to give you some kind of a like training wheels, they fail at actually delivering the knowledge that is actually needed on the spot when you are at your job, because they are synthetic. They are prefabricated in order to be a safe space. They are there to create the safety nets all around you and to give you like clear-cut objectives and clear-cut problems, and you just need to find the solution because the documentation is there and everything is there and you know what is malfunctioning very often. So this is good in order to understand the concepts, and I think it is very important to go through like the tutorials online in order to understand the broad concepts and fundamentals. But staying for too long in the tutorial hell is going to do you more of a disservice that is going to actually help you. And the reason for that is that, like I said, this is a synthetic environment. In the real world, the chaos is everywhere. Like there's, even at best of the organizations and the best of the projects, the documentation is missing, or it's faulty, or something is done the specific way and only the people inside know what way that is. Sometimes you don't know what the reason for a problem is and you need to ask around. There is lots of stuff that is happening that the synthetic problems that are pre-prepared for you ain't going to prepare you for. I would say that real life projects are more of a mix between a theme park and a battlefield. So it's way more hectic. It's also way more engaging, but it's way more hectic. It's way more random. There is way more uncertainty. You will be dealing around with workarounds, with dirty little fixes, with some like guerrilla solutions which were supposed to be there only for a duration of a sprint, and suddenly they are there for like 15 years. And when you combine all of that and it's just stacked on top of each other for a long time, then you get the picture of what the actual work is like. You'll see stuff that you would not have ever even imagined when you are outside and when you are just safely learning on the sidelines. And that's also why I'm a big proponent of getting into the field as soon as possible. Once you get the fundamentals and the broad strokes, you should already try to get into the field, because the only way to get better at real life test automation engineering is being a test automation engineer. There's no real way around it. You can prepare, you should understand the fundamentals, but you should only learn as much as is needed so that you can learn more on the job. You will learn faster, better, and you will learn stuff that you wouldn't have learned otherwise if you don't do it that way. So don't stay in the tutorial hell forever. And finally, number 5 is that you'll often be more of a detective than you will be an engineer. It's easy to think that as a test automation engineer, you will just automate. So first of all, I think this is a fallacy, because there is nothing about just automating that would warrant thinking that test automation engineering is just doing that, because just automating entails a lot of things, like we've also talked a moment before. But one thing that it also entails is that it's focused on narrowing down the issues, on hunting down the culprits of the whole problem. In reality, actually writing the code within the framework will take up quite little of your time, proportionally speaking. Most of the time will be used up for fighting the uncertainty, for narrowing down the issues, for talking with people, for understanding other elements that are working together, for understanding the mechanism, how it all comes together, and how all these real knobs turn at one point or another. Understanding the tools, the application itself, your code, talking to people to come up with some solutions or some hypotheses, very often quite crazy hypotheses, then you'll need to somehow test and see if they actually hold water. This is also why I talked before about the interdisciplinary knowledge, because very often you will need to actually look at things from so many different perspectives and think where things might have gone wrong, that you will be more of a detective than actually an engineer following a protocol. For most of for very much of the work you are going to be doing, there is no clear-cut protocol. There is protocol for some parts of it, but for narrowing down the issue and for actually seeing it in the wild and catching the actual problem, very often there is no protocol for finding the reason that a bug is happening. Sometimes it is and with experience, it'll also become easier, but sometimes it is more or less logical, but very often it entails talking to different people in order to actually find it and thinking outside of the box to actually think of what even may be causing the problem, because it may be a few levels down the ladder of your tech stack. You will often come across problems that will leave you scratching your head. Like, why isn't that working? Is it because of the code, because of the application, of some configuration, of external dependencies? Is it because of unstable environments? And you need to know that all those things are there in the first place in order to actually know that they may be a problem. And so you need to be a good detective at your application and to get kind of a holistic view, a bird's eye view over it, in order to actually know what the problem may be, what is even the domain of things that may influence something that is causing the problem. This is also what makes the job so engaging. It keeps you on your toes. You are never 100% sure. You need to be able to think outside of the box, validate your ideas and your hypotheses, and it's never like 100% very often until the last minute. So it's just about like weighing in the options, and this is once again what is so engaging and interesting in this job and in this way of working, that you are never 100% going like following a linear path. Very often it's diverging in different directions, and you need to know which paths to take and which paths to actually prune, and that comes with experience, and that is also quite a lot of fun of this job. So as you can see, being a test automation engineer is a job that comes with quite a bit of asterisks, and like I said, there's plenty more to come, but I hope that talking about those today have actually helped you to lift some fog off the things that you might have thought about the job of a test automation engineer. It's important to be aware of all these asterisks and to actually be prepared for what may actually come once you start working. Like I said, there's more than that coming in the future, and I'll be happy to cover all of those that come to mind for you. For today, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Please remember to like and subscribe. Leave your comments below the video. I invite you to like our profile on Facebook, Instagram. Thank you very much, and keep on rocking.